Hey, Bad Christian here again. Today we're going to do a full tutorial on how to make morel mushroom slurry. Now, a few things you're going to need here. You're going to need some flour. You're going to need some molasses. I use birdseed. This is just cheap birdseed that you get from the Dollar General. You're going to need a blender. Okay, and you're going to need a few morel mushrooms. These are some that we had that grew up in the yard. Let me get out here in the light where we can see them. And they basically went to spore already. But there's still a lot of really great spores in there. And the more mushrooms that you guys use in this, the more successful you'll be because the more spores that you'll have. All right, next thing you're going to need is a bucket. I'm using, this is for our cat's litter, and it's got a convenient lid that opens and closes, so that makes it work really well. And I've got a couple of holes poked in here. And one is to breathe, to let the air out, and one is later on we're going to put an aerator in here so that this thing doesn't go anaerobic on us. And so all you got to do is get your bucket, get your ingredients, and get your blender, and begin to blend your ingredients and put them in the bucket with some water. Now, when you put water in the bucket, don't use cold water, and don't use hot water. Use room temperature, and maybe fill up the bucket, I don't know, maybe a third of the way, a quarter of the way, somewhere in there. It's not exact science. I don't have the exact recipe, but I do have this, and it did work for us last year, so I'm sharing that with you guys now. All right, and what you're going to do, a lot of people don't use birdseed. They just use flour or cornmeal or whatever grain they have laying around, and that's fine. I do have a little bit of experience growing mushrooms, and I have found that, especially with a questionable type of spore like Morchella or the morel, that one of the major issues is figuring out the specific nutrients and grains that it actually prefers over other things. Now, if you're anybody that's involved in this, you're going to have an opinion on this. And like I said, I'm no professional, but I have been successful with this. But what I like to do is I like to take some of that birdseed and basically create a flour. So basically what you end up with is basically like wild flour. Now, you can make bread with that. I wouldn't suggest it, but this actually is something that is probably more likely to get the spores to actually germinate and get them started, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get these spores, get them started on something, dilute them into water, and then we're going to dump them in places that are favorable for them to grow. And I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it right in my bucket with my water. And I'm just going to dump it in there. It's no big deal. I'm not worried about stirring it right now or anything. I just want to get it in there and kind of get it started saturating. Next thing I want to do is get some flour, and I'm not measuring it. We'll just, maybe, don't take a whole lot. I got to get some mushrooms in there with it. It's probably what, half a cup maybe, about a cup. We're going to add our mushrooms. Just going to throw them in there. Like I said, the more mushrooms you have at this point, the better. If you can fill that thing all the way up, you're going to be a lot better off than just a few. But you'll be surprised. There are thousands, if not millions, of spores just in those few mushrooms that we have there. And now I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of water to it. And this is the point where we kind of make what you'll hear people talk about, the milkshake. Okay. And so we've got some water in there, and I'm gonna take, this is Grandma's molasses, all right? Just straight molasses, and I'm gonna put, maybe 5-6 tablespoons of that in there. We wanna sweeten it up because it needs sugar for the germination to happen properly. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna juice that up and make us a nice little mushroom shake. Just take our beautiful milkshake, and then you just, no, I'm kidding. Don't do it. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you do that, I'm not responsible. Okay. We've got it in there, and there's still some spores and stuff in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and rinse some water in this and try to get, because there's spores in here. There's spores in here. Even gonna take the jar that had the mushrooms in it, and I'm gonna get me a shot of that too, because I guarantee you there's spores in here on the edge of this. All right. Now, the next thing that you're going to need is, so in the wild, Morchella or morels, they prefer, they usually prefer like apple, elm, hardwoods, things along those natures. So I just picked these up for like $5. And what they are is they're just smoking chips, just apple smoking pellets. And that's okay. They don't have anything in them that should be harmful to them. And they're just little pellets that are used for cooking and smoking stuff. And what, you know, when I put these in here, what happens is that there's stuff in that apple wood that is good for those mushrooms. And as they try to seed in there, and those pellets begin to swell, they will hopefully draw some of the spores, the germinated spores in there, and they will help them grow and kind of get started so that when we inoculate the ground, they're more likely to take off for us. All right, one final ingredient. This is lime. It's just regular gardening lime. It's powdered. You don't want pellets. This is not the best option for this. Actually, a better option is to have ashes out of a fire pit that have not been rained on, because they've got things in there that are really, really, really good for the mycelium. So, but this will work. A lime will work in the same way. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some of that in my mix, and I'm sure it helps with the. That's just probably 1/3 of a cup, just enough to spice her up just a bit. All right, and I'm gonna put just a little bit more water in this bucket here, because sometimes when you aerate it, it will bubble a little bit, and it'll kind of bubble up in there. So you don't want to fill it all the way up, you know. Maybe halfway, that'll work. You don't have to worry about filling it all the way up, because later on you can dilute it down just as much as you want into other buckets. Alrighty, next thing you're gonna need is an aerator. This is just a small, cheap fish tank aerator. I think I paid $9 or $10 at Walmart for it. It wasn't much. And you're gonna need an aerating stone, which this one's kind of dark because I've used it a few times, but it works great. And obviously the tube that comes with it. You're gonna have to make sure you have to have all this stuff. And then what you do is, I love this setup because it's got the opening lid. Guys, you can use a 5-gallon bucket. You can use whatever you have. It's good to be able to seal it up, though, just to keep stuff out. It actually smells really good, too. Anyway, so what I do is, this hole's just big enough to feed that in there. And see, I've got air that'll go in, and then I've got me an exit hole where the air can come out. So then, I take my stone here, and I throw the stone on there. Now, see, I've got this here, and I can just feed that down in there. Get that right where I like it, and it'll just kind of stay there. This setup works so well for this. And you just hook up your aerator here. Pretty simple. And you plug him in, and then boom. Now we're aerating. And that oxygen will help everything it'll help everything germinate and whatnot. Go ahead and kind of stir up that stuff on the bottom right just a little bit. Yeah. Okay, all you got to do is let this brew for 3 to 4 days. I usually like to let mine go 4 days. And then you dilute it into buckets of water. This particular one, because the amount of actual mushrooms I got in there, I probably won't make any more than maybe 5 or 6 5-gallon buckets full. Dilute this into those and then dump them around the trees. But this is part one. When this is done brewing, we're going to come back and we're going to do part two of this. So hope to see you soon.